founded and acts as CEO of Psyche Innovations, which is the company behind Psyche Mental Health, a digital mental health app which provides access to mental wellness resources worldwide. And his leadership, which has been recognized by the American Psychological Association, is evidence of his global impact. So that's very impressive, Daniel, and thank you very much for coming to share with us your talk this afternoon, which is on transforming Africa's mental health, the Psyche app approach. So I will say over to you, Daniel. Colleagues who are online, if we can keep our comments for Daniel until the end, there'll be a few minutes, I'm sure. So if you have any comments or questions, and then also welcome to everyone again in person as well. So thanks so much, Daniel, and over to you.
Thank you, Bron. All right, I hope everyone can see me and can hear me. Thank you for joining me in person or online. So as Bronwyn said, well, actually, thank you very much, Bronwyn, for having me. Bronwyn was my honors supervisor and actually got me into research, so I'm very grateful for that. So yeah, let's get going. If I can move to that, there we go. So what am I talking about today? Why I'm doing this, the motivation, the problem that we're trying to solve, how we're trying to solve that problem, what some of the challenges are for for-profits trying to solve this problem, non-profits and academia, and then just a discussion around what collaboration could look like for trying to solve this problem. Okay, so Bronwyn talked about it. My background is in molecular biology and then psychology, having studied at...
Please stand a little bit in the back down so that people might see your face. I'm just hearing that and relaxed.
Oh, sorry, my bad, too close. So yeah, my background was in those things at Stellenbosch, and I focused on young people with disabilities. Because of a personal history, my brother had a disability and he took his life, hence the sort of like mission behind this. And through that research, I found that people with disabilities, especially congenital birth defects, needed more opportunities to learn skills and promote their mental health. So fast forward then to my PhD, it looked at designing, implementing, and assessing evidence-based interventions that taught these kind of positive psychology skills. Because of the efficacy we were seeing and the reach, we started a nonprofit organization, the PYDF, which continues to do that work. I was then inspired while in the APA Global Emerging Leaders program to think larger about how we could reach more people. And having been in academia, working in the department here and at Global Health at Tygerberg, I got a sort of unique insight into the challenges of academia and the nonprofit sector. So I thought I'd try my hand in the business world, and hence that's where Psyche Innovations came from. So as a lot of you may know, the problem scale that we're looking at, so about a quarter of people in their lifetime will struggle with poor mental health, distress or dysfunction. And then in South Africa, we unfortunately have a huge treatment gap. So about 1 in 10 people can access treatment. The statistics for our province show that there is 1 psychologist to every 71,000 people. So for perspective, Greenpoint Stadium has 50,000 seats. So just imagine one person trying to reach that many people. So we know that the solution isn't going to be in treatment, at least not in the next couple decades. We also know that poor mental health is one of the leading causes of death and disability globally, having unfortunately experienced some of that. So the scale of the problem in South Africa is enormous, and unfortunately it gets worse the higher up we go in Africa, where we're trying to make impact as well. So the question I always ask, can we afford to wait? No, we can't. We have to do something about this now. So the other challenges are mental health literacy, stigma, cost, access, and efficacy. So when we're looking at mental health literacy, the general public doesn't really know much about what mental health is, what it means, and that again exacerbates stigma. So people aren't looking for resources, they aren't speaking to people who might be knowledgeable purely because of lack of knowledge. Then there's psychological skills, which is sort of like the meat and potatoes of what we do in our app. These are skills and competencies that everyone has, but often haven't been learned or practiced intentionally. because of how the education system is structured and universities as well, there isn't a lot of explicit training in these skills that can help improve mental health. Then there's cost. So digital interventions are, of course, some of the cheapest interventions there are because it's digital, right? But if we look at ones developed in the global north, for example, Headspace is a large mental health company that does mindfulness meditation. You're looking at a cost of $14 a month, which is, of course, inaccessible to most Africans. Then, of course, there's access. So I spoke a little bit about the treatment gap. Now, that's even more difficult for young people and people with disabilities and chronic health conditions trying to access resources. So digital can overcome some of those barriers, especially with adoption of digital tools in sub-Saharan Africa. Then the last one is efficacy. So systematic reviews show us that only 3 to 4% of mental health apps are evidence-based or evidence-informed. So a lot of people are using tools out there that, I'm just going to admit, oh, I couldn't admit somebody, okay, that don't necessarily work. Okay, so what are we trying to do? We're trying to make mental health promotion, so promotion and prevention rather than treatment, accessible to as many people as we can. We try to use a holistic approach, teaching a broad range of skills and competencies that are appropriate to many different types of people. The skills are designed to be real-world applicable, so they're not these theoretical things that you can't really implement in your life. And we try to make them as evidence-based and evidence-informed as possible. Right, so what does our app actually do? It has 3 core components. It's a mental health assessment. It teaches psychological skills and includes mental health resources. So the mental health scale is a non-diagnostic scale that looks at the social determinants or psychosocial determinants of well-being. What's cool about these is that they're things that all affect us and we can all work on improving them. So we have a degree of agency over them. Then the psychological skills, as I said, they're about being practical and usable, but we focus on 3 core elements with them. So we're trying to build knowledge, we're trying to change attitudes and beliefs, and then we're trying to look at behavior change, so getting people to actually use the skill. And then lastly, we have mental health resources. So these focus on psychoeducation. So we have a word game that teaches concepts in a simplified sort of fun way. We have goal setting, so people can set goals in the domains of well-being that we have. And then we also have helplines. So we direct people to helplines, regardless of where they are in the world, to use toll-free numbers in their country. So again, these are the sort of key elements to the app: mental health assessment, skills, and then those additional resources. Right, so we look at 8 core domains. Users use Likert scales or rating scales in simpler terms, to review 3 items or 3 questions per domain. Users then get a visual analog, the radial pie chart, which has the 100 in the middle. Those pie chart sections sort of move to indicate how well people are doing. They can also track how their well-being is changing with time using the history function. So it's a way for somebody to sort of get a point-in-time assessment of how they're doing and then learn and focus on skills that promote those domains. So we then teach skills in bite-sized interactive ways that promote those domains. So for example, if we look at the physical domain, we look at diet, exercise, and sleep. So an example of sleep would be sleep hygiene. So we explain what it is, how it helps, and then we have interactive activities that teach that skill in a way that people can apply very quickly. So sometimes it's feedback, sometimes it's audio, and it's designed to be quick and hopefully fun. Right, so then the mental health resources. I hope I'm not going through this too quickly. The mental health resources, as I said, there's a word game, so people choose a word and it helps explain it in terms that are sort of at a low literacy level. And then we have the helpline functions, as I already said, and then the goals. So that's an example of one of my goals. I'm running a marathon this year in October. So you can break down your goals into smaller sort of bite-sized chunks. And it's also gamified. You have like levels. So it's just another way to encourage people to work on the things that are important to them. I also want to stress is the assessment is designed not to be diagnostic. for a number of reasons. As you saw, we don't have treatment. It can be unethical to say that you're ill and not be able to have resources for somebody. And also, as I said, it's the determinants of well-being. So they're all the different things that make up wellness that you can work on: your physical activity, your social connections, your sense of self-worth, your life satisfaction, in small concrete ways. And we hope that our users, which they are, use the goal-setting feature to achieve this. Right, so the impact we're already seeing is the apps being used in 65 countries around the world. 15 of them are African. Part of our approach is to work with nonprofits. We're trying to ramp up that reach in Senegal and Tanzania at the moment as part of a Grand Challenges grant. But enough about that. So now I want to talk about how different types of organizations go about solving problems and the pros and cons or challenges of those different organization types. Right, so for profit, obviously its primary focus is revenue generation, because you have to employ people to be sustainable. Most of the sustainable digital mental health apps are for-profit companies because it's just easier. Well, it's supposed to be easier. What they do then is they focus on specific niche issues, and there's a lot of market competitiveness. When you have the choice between two products, the user actually dictates how high the quality of the product is, which is a good thing, right? You want the pink race bike that looks cool. You don't want the bland gray bike that doesn't appeal to you, right? So the companies are rewarded for making good products. They're also rewarded for making products and services that have high user engagement, because you don't want to create something that has all the information and technically should work, but nobody actually uses, right? But the challenges in the for-profit space is that profit can often override the importance of efficacy as well as user benefit. Because of high engagement and revenue driving a lot of the conversation, mental health apps or health apps or education apps in general can start slowly tending towards Candy Crush. Now, that's no knock on Candy Crush, like super successful, but Candy Crush isn't going to improve your mental health. So there's a balance between gamification and engagement and impact, right? Nobody wants a vaccine or to get a jab in the arm, but playing Candy Crush, which is more fun, isn't going to vaccinate you. That was a strange metaphor, but you understand what I'm trying to say. So that's kind of the challenge of the for-profit space, is balancing profit with user welfare. So government and regulations does often get involved, but there's also this sort of dance. So if we look in the app space, 99% of mental health apps are listed as being well-being apps. Part of the reason is because in America, where most of them are from, has regulations, very strict regulations, to be considered a health app. And for a for-profit company to go through stringent, extremely detailed application processes to then have very similar product can be a huge hamper on the success of a company. So you start to see that it's this give and take in all the industries that we see to try drive impact. Right, then nonprofits. So for them, it's all about community outreach and number of people you can reach. And it's often through a mission-driven sort of lens. The problem with nonprofits is you have one person who pays, the nonprofit who then gets the money, and another person who's the person who receives the service. The metrics of success go to the donor or funder, not to the person who uses the product or service. And they often have very little control over the quality of the service. So for example, if you're a nonprofit reporting to the Department of Social Development or whoever your funder is, it looks like how many people did you reach? You know, did you take nice pictures? So efficacy is sometimes there, depending on if it's a research-funded organization like the Wellcome Trust, the Grand Challenges, or whatever, but that often isn't the case. So, as I said, there's a usage funding disconnect, and there's often limited resources. So because you're providing services to people who can't pay for it, we often get sort of like a flavor of the month thing that happens in the funding space. Oh, now it's Save the Whales. Next month it's mental health. Then mental health is done. Now it's ECD. So that's something that we also see is organizations that are nonprofits that's supposed to be mission driven, having to change and reframe what they're doing just to be able to be competitive in the sort of like donor space. Also, the thing that isn't spoken about a lot is a lot of non-profit organizations or social good organizations have huge endowments. So they actually run off investment money, and it's usually from very wealthy individuals that put a lot of money in. So they kind of actually are only have to report to themselves in a way. So yeah, anyway. So the other challenges we see there is quite minimalistic apps. So if you're not held accountable to the user and the user only has one option, you get what you get, whether that's a gray bicycle or something that's ugly but supposedly works. That's often the case. Right, then we have academia. So the primary focus here is on research output. Often we have a lot of concentration around safety and efficacy, and then educational value. What are we learning out of this test, this app, this production? The challenges with that is business sustainability. So academic institutions, whether it's Stellenbosch University or whoever, they're not actually set up to create sustainable business models. So sometimes they have, for example, a launch lab that's designed to help spin out companies, but show me a spin-out mental health company that came from a university. There's probably one or two that you could maybe say in the past couple decades. So that's one of the challenges here, is that every industry's metrics of success are different, and finding a way for them to collaborate together can be quite difficult because you have to frame it in terms that is beneficial to that organization, right? So academics, for example, are not rewarded through the grants they receive or the amount of academic output. So being involved in a for-profit venture, unless they split their involvement in academia and for-profit industry, doesn't really serve their needs some of the times. So that's often what we see. And then one of the saddest things that we see in academia is lots of funding and money goes towards developing a product. It has a specific duration and a test period and achieves very set aims in a very niche market in a very specific population. And once that's done, it dies. And that research gets shelved. And there are tons of mental health apps that have existed where they were developed by the World Health Organization or academia that are never used, and they're dead. They're completely dead apps. So that's one of the big problems we see there as well. That time is wrong. I don't know how fast I'm going. Okay, so overall comparison. So if we're looking at for-profits, commercial viability is high to medium. User engagement is some of the highest we see in digital intervention. And this is also true for educational apps or education, because we're in the ed tech, health tech sort of crossover. Safety and efficacy can be variable. So you have some companies that take it very seriously and others that don't at all. So it's just about putting out content, making it Candy Crush-esque, for lack of a better word. And then sustainability is high to moderate, depending on, because they're also competing in an ever-changing environment of who's putting money into solving which challenges. Then nonprofits, commercial viability is often nothing. Sometimes you get nonprofit organizations that also sell their product. So you get nonprofit companies, for example, but we don't tend to see that much in the tech space. And then user engagement really varies in terms of how much people use things. So digital mental health apps sometimes often have between 10 to 5% user engagement within a week period. So you see huge initial drop-off of people using digital interventions if they're not designed in a way that really solves the problem for a user in a way that they want the problem to be solved for them, if that makes sense. Safety and efficacy also varies greatly depending on who the funder is, what success looks like. And as I said, it's very funding dependent as different topics become more and less important. Well, on a global scale. And then we have academia. So commercial viability, very low, because the institution's not really set up to create products that are meant to be economically viable. The, of course, exception is when you have spin-out companies through, for example, Launch Lab or a university's version of that. And in those cases, those products can be very successful. But in the ed tech and health tech spaces, that can be very difficult. User engagement, again, really depends. Often it's extremely low, as all the systematic reviews tend to show us, but in some cases, they're very high, and that's also when it's particularly sad, when this research project did really well for a certain person, and then there wasn't a model set up for an entrepreneur or a business or whatever to continue to take that product further and to continue to develop it. And that's also one of the big challenges we see there is something's made really well and there's no plan for continuing to adapt and improve that product and service over time. So you'll notice that when you start going on apps and stuff now, you'll see, I wonder when last this thing was actually worked on and improved. And then of course, sustainability there is very grant dependent. Right, so what could collaboration look like and how might it work? Now that's a very tricky thing, is finding a space where everyone has some sort of mutual benefit out of it. And I wish I could stand here and go, I know the solution. I know we put our logo in the middle there, but it is difficult because success looks different, and creating those structures that are sustainable is also very difficult, especially when revenue or funding is low. Pushing the wrong button. Okay, so what does academic collaboration look like? Of course, there's many different ways. So for us, it looks like potentially joint research projects, internships, co-creation of content, sharing of data, and collaborative studies. So we've already run 6 internships, and we have another honors student actually from this year starting with us this week, which is cool. It gives interns the ability to learn product management and content creation and impact and collaborating with nonprofits from around the world. So that relationship is very beneficial for the students and for us, and as far as possible, we remunerate those students. So that is a very sort of like light touch example of how for-profit companies can try to do that. Then there's providing data and shared sort of like research projects. So for a for-profit company to share their learnings, there's also trickiness in that, because if they share too much, they're giving away their sort of like secret sauce of what they do that's impactful and helping people. So there has to be sort of a striking a balance between sharing data that helps improve public health and science as a whole, but also not sharing too much of the sort of like secrets that help make that business sustainable. So for me, that looks like joint research projects that are collaborative in nature, applying for funding together from an organization, for example, Grand Challenges or the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation or whoever you want to choose, NIH, and you say, okay, well, these are the parameters of what success look like. And they are then incentivized to work together. So the academics doing the research and the publications have the data, and the for-profit companies have the efficacy to show, hey, this works for us. Why do they want to do that? Because then it can be easier to get larger customers, because they can show, hey, what we're trying to do is validated. So in that way, the institutions both benefit. The academic institutions can also have more funding to have more postdocs or more students and better equipment. So that's also one of the things that we're looking at as well. Then there's co-creation. This is the one I find quite fun. So we've co-created a lot of our content on our app with mental health experts from around the world, Romanian clinical psychologists, American psychiatrists, American clinical psychologists, there's a few, sports scientists, whatever. And that's, I think, what's quite fun, is a lot of academics are very knowledgeable, intensely knowledgeable on something very specific and are looking for impact. And we create a way in which they can co-create content, learn user experience and user design and product development and see their work reaching hundreds, if not hundreds of thousands of people around the world. So that's, yeah, that's the spiel. So I don't know what you think collaboration could look like. If you have any questions, try to get through this fast to give you an opportunity to ask me whatever questions you might have.
Questions or comments from the floor? The panel? Just going to have a quick look here online.
So Daniel, as we wait for people to think through some comments, can you tell us a little bit more about the research behind the app, and then also what your co-creation process has been like, and how you select people that you co-create with?
Yeah, in the beginning stages, it was really just picking people that I liked and did cool stuff, and I thought, hey, let's work on something together. We've become more selective with time because the realization is that the upfront work that the co-creator does, so say they do 10 or 20 hours, we're doing 5 to 10 times more hours on our end to create the content. So we have to be selective in who we work with. So that's one of the things. And it has really been quite fun, to be honest. We also get them on as webinar guests to sort of grow their reach. And so we kind of like promote them as well in a way. Yeah. So did I answer your question?
The second part, the first part was more about the research.
The research, yeah. Right. So universal psychology, I guess, is either something people like to hear or is a dirty word in academia. But that's kind of our approach, is we focus on skills and competencies that everyone uses and needs. Everyone sleeps, everyone eats, everyone needs to learn how to ask for help. So in as many ways as possible, we look at the basic knowledge and attitudes and behavior change around that skill, because people struggle with different things. The example I like to use is medical doctors. They have these signs all up around Tygerberg, like don't smoke, it's a smoking-free campus. But of course, medical doctors smoke, but they know that they shouldn't. So it's not a knowledge issue, it's an attitude or belief issue. Or if it isn't, it's a behavior change thing. They might know that it's bad for them. They might know that they're doing it in a way that's self-sabotaging their health, but they need to learn a way to actually take the steps to improve that unhealthy behavior, or replace it with a more healthy one. So that's sort of the approach we take with all the skills that we build. And then we use as much evidence as we can. We look at systematic reviews, we look at academia, published papers to see, okay, what methodologies are people using? What is the content that they're trying to use? And then much of the hard work really is distilling that into a way that uses as few words as possible, is as engaging as possible. Because the truth of the matter is that people don't like to read a lot. It's not amount of value anymore because of how much value there is on the internet. It's how much value can you provide in a short period of time. And that's why things like TikTok do really well, because they're designed to stream out all the long, unnecessary waffle to give you as much learning or laughs or whatever in a shorter period of time. And that's the difficult part. And I think there's this misconception in academia around efficacy and whatever. Like, we know a lot of things work. We know. It's just, can we package it in a way that reaches people? One of my mentors, Jason, always said, the medicine works, but it tastes bad. How do we make the medicine taste good? So that's kind of been our approach with developing content.
Okay, thank you. Anybody else? Linus.
Instead of assessments, talk about the process of like constructing.
Yeah, so that was quite a lengthy process. We looked at a lot of valid and reliable scales that measured all sorts of different things. In the beginning, we looked at diagnostic scales and well-being scales, and I mean, there were tons. And we basically ruled out diagnostic scales for many reasons. One being that they're really good for a point in time measurement, but they're not actually useful at measuring change. So if you do a depression scale now and then you do our skills doing a depression scale later, they're not actually designed for that purpose. So those were chopped down. Then of the scales that existed, they often had blind spots or they had overlap. So if you want the PHQ-9, I think is one of the big ones, or PHQ-7, you say, okay, well, this scale maybe covers this part of well-being quite well, but it misses all of these. So then we tried to get another one, but then there was overlap. And as soon as you move, because you don't want like 3 questions on the same thing, because if a scale's too long, people stop doing them. So then if you remove some of the items, then you've messed with the validity and reliability of the scale. And we tried over and over, and eventually basically what we realized is that we needed to take specific constructs and items from the best scales and adapt them for an overall sort of construct. We also had to be mindful, because our app, I didn't mention this, is designed for people who are adolescents and older. We also decided to remove measurements of financial or occupational success. So you might look at our assessment and go, well, that's not the whole measure of well-being. And yes, that's true, because we removed those because we felt that they weren't appropriate to young people. We may at a later stage include those measurements for people who identify themselves as being older. But we also, because of privacy laws and protection, we ask for as little demographic information on people as possible. Not always the best business decision, but it's the right thing to do. So we might add that back. So is our scale perfect? I don't think there is such a thing. And we continue to run tests to see how well it works. And what's also cool with our organizational customers is that we show them at an aggregate level what content their organization is using and enjoying, how their mental health assessments have changed over time, so that they can actually see what bang for buck that they're getting out of it. And then they also get to see, oh, most of my employees are struggling with the resilience domain. So like maybe it's stress and managing their mood or whatever. And then they can, if even they decide not to use our tool anymore, they can have targeted interventions in their organization because they've learned what they're doing well at or struggling with. I gave you more of your question than you asked. Any other questions?
No, we have a hand from Alex online. Please unmute yourself.
Hi, Daniel. Thank you. That was such an interesting presentation. I've got a couple of questions, so I might have missed this. Is this a freely accessible app on the Play Store?
Yeah, so we have what's called a freemium model. So most of the basic features of the app are free, and then there's a subscription model to have access to all the resources. I wish that we were funded by some huge donor so that we could make everything free, but no. But a lot of the app is free.
Okay, my reason for asking was just I was wondering around sort of accessibility and data, given the challenges on the African continent.
Yeah, so we sell discounted access of the app to nonprofit organizations from around the world. If you're from Stellenbosch, Reach Trust, and Community Keepers, being some of them. And we do this at a heavy discount. So this allows nonprofit organizations to provide access of the tool to people in low resource communities who otherwise wouldn't be able to pay for it. Then data, that is a complicated question to answer. So we've designed the app to be as low data intensive as possible. So I think the initial download is, well, the number is irrelevant, but it's small. And we continue to do that as much as possible. And we use some technical gobbledygook or systems to reduce that as much as possible. But it is a complicated issue. As we know, people in South Africa, through user testing and research, they often decide whether they will or won't download an app based on how many megabytes it is, because of space on their phone or because of data costs. But we are mindful of that.
Thank you. And then just one final question. I just was wondering about sort of drop off. So, you mentioned the whole TikTok thing and the short attention span that people have. What do you see in terms of trends? Do people stay engaged over time? Do they tend to do a little bit of content and then drop off? What have you noticed?
That's something I won't say in the webinar, but I'll talk to you about later.
Okay. Cool. Thank you so much.
For sure.
Thanks, Alex. We have a comment from Beauty. Would you classify Psyche Innovation as a wellness app or a mental health app? How did you reach this in South Africa?
There is no wellness app, is the short answer. We're a wellness app because of the range of content we cover, and we're also not treatment focused. And because of the stigma around mental health, we try to avoid that label as much as possible. So we call ourselves a wellness app as much as possible.
Okay. And then JP says, I always wonder if people tend to use such apps instead of putting in the harder work of personal therapy to achieve insight and growth. Is this the type of information you can pick up from your users?
Yeah, so I don't see it as an either or. Our app is designed in a way that it's complementary to mental health professionals and the work that they do, or people who are seeking treatment. If you are, you have the privilege of being able to access treatment, our app can help that. Learning additional skills, monitoring your mental health, and tracking and see how you're doing is only a beneficial add-on. And for people who can't access it, it's also helpful. So if we look at the mental health continuum, and this is sort of like something we try to put in our messaging, is that some people are really struggling and some people are doing really well. And the skills that we teach can help somebody regardless of where they are in the mental health continuum. So we can take people who are very high functioning, very successful, and hopefully help them operate at an even higher level. And people who are struggling, make incremental improvement, even if they're struggling. But the reality of life is that we go through these sort of like ups and downs. Sometimes we're doing well and sometimes we're at the bottom. And our approach really is to try help people stay at the top more, put people on a positive trajectory, and reduce how low people dip when they hit adversity, and that they can spring back faster.
And then Alex says, have you experienced any issues with language if the content is provided in English only?
Yeah, so we are planning to roll out a translation API next year so that all the content can be translated into any language. But at the present, it's only in English. And for most of our user testing, we haven't had an issue with that, but we've only done user testing with about 150 people. So including adolescents with disabilities, Stellenbosch University students, and adults.
Great. And JP says it sounds like a very valuable resource, and Beauty says thank you as well. I know you said you have your reasoning for not including demographics, but do you consider contextualizing the content?
Yeah, so contextualizing is obviously a very difficult topic, and it really depends on what you mean when you say contextualizing. That could mean making the language more appropriate or easier for low literacy and younger age group. It could mean including a more diverse range of people who co-create content with us to represent the diversity of people on the planet. We try as much as we can to include as much contextualization and accessibility. We have lots of things on the pipeline, for example, text to audio, as well as increasing text size for people who are visually impaired. So there's a lot of work that we're trying to do, but of course we're a small startup company. So if there's any billionaires in the audience who would like to give me more money, I'd love to do more contextualization. But yeah, it's a tricky one. So again, I'd like to engage with you afterwards. There's so much to say on that topic. No, like I said, we don't collect age, but most of our, it's hard to give you a definitive answer that I would feel confident saying. Yeah.
But it wouldn't specifically be a breach if you collected age.
No, it wouldn't. We're definitely going to in the future collect age. So we will give users the option to self-report rather than say, it's part of creating a profile. So rather you can come on, and if you want to identify your age and your gender or your sex or like all these different things, then it's up to the user. But up until this point, also just for privacy policies and all that stuff, it's just much easier to ask for as little as possible. But we will in the future for sure.
Great. Any other questions online? Don't see anything specific. I don't know if you're going to like this question or not, but is Psyche Innovations for sale?
Is it for sale?
Yeah. As a for-profit, if somebody offers you, you get an offer enough, so something like selling Twitter to Elon Musk, would Daniel Page accept that?
Yeah, I would. For the right amount of money, I would. But that's kind of the game of being a tech startup, is you're actually looking for large investment.
Yeah.
Because for me, it's not just like a way to make money. It's a mission for me. So even if Elon Musk came and dropped $1 billion on me, I would say, I need to stay on as CEO to run the company. So that wouldn't change what I want to do. It would just change the resources I had at my disposal to do it.
Yeah, that's a good answer. No, I'm just teasing you, Daniel. No. Yes, Claudia.
Hi guys, thank you for the presentation. Prior to this talk, I've never heard of the app. I have now downloaded it since the talk. And I was just wondering, when the advertisers and people get access to it?
That's a very good question. So if you have a lot of money, you do paid ads on Google or on social media. We don't have a huge budget for advertising, so we do what's called content marketing. So we try to create good content that people engage with. So you might come across some of our webinars in the future. We try to create video content and written stuff. And that way you're more organically building a market of people who are actually really interested in what you're doing. But if you have a lot of money, you basically do tons of paid marketing to grow your brand recognition. The other thing that we're trying to do to grow our brand recognition is to work with very reputable organizations. So we have a few non-profits. So I went for impact first. We sold to a few non-profits. We're working with some in Tanzania and Senegal and South Africa. The Western Cape Education Department is starting to use our app. The City of Cape Town has our app listed on their e-resources website. So in a way, by creating a good product that people hear about and experience, that is going to become our marketing rather than paid ads, if that makes sense.
And I want to follow up on asking, you mentioned TikTok and it's work right now. I mean, everybody has TikTok nowadays.
I don't.
You don't? Everybody has, and it's such a valuable tool for advertising because it can sway people's opinions very quickly. Even if people don't have TikTok, they can share the videos on WhatsApp or whatever. So I was just wondering, to reach like adolescents, we know a lot of mental health issues starting at that age. Do you have any TikTok ads talking about like, hey, I've seen this cool app, just about young people talking about it or something like that? Do you have anything like that?
Yeah, it's very funny you say that. So of course, different social medias reach different demographics. So LinkedIn for us obviously reaches a professional audience. And we had Facebook and Instagram and YouTube. Facebook and Instagram are really difficult to grow an audience on, and we kind of market that at young adults and older. And we very recently, I had the thesis that doing TikTok would work to grow a younger audience. And we actually very recently hired somebody to create our TikTok content, and somebody who was very good at that. And she's actually sitting right over there.
Oh.
So yeah, we've only released 2 videos and it's going quite well. So Kitty's doing well.
Appeasing the youth.
Yeah.
Speaking about the TikTok, so I want to know, like, do they have like something like the line mascot? Does it have a name? Like, do you use it on TikTok?
Yeah, Kitty will hit me over the head. She wants to do that. We definitely do want to do something like that.
I've followed the line mascot so much, and then it's like, Duolingo's doing really well.
Yeah, you definitely have to do those kind of like fun, engaging things to get people to care about mental health, because I think that's one of the challenges and one of the things, studying psychology so far is you think it's normal, the conversations we have and the things we know. You get stuck in this bubble, and the general public, like, they don't know, and it's a scary topic. It's something they don't want to talk about. So breaking down those barriers and making mental health and mental health promotion more accessible is such a big goal for us. So doing stuff like that is definitely something we want to do more of for sure.
So check. All right. Yeah, it's interesting though, the space around mental health awareness, and I think some of the current debates around over-identification and the romanticization and glorification of mental health problems. So it'll be interesting to see how that plays out in the TikTok space. But nonetheless, we have an important imperative to raise mental health awareness, but on the other hand, making sure that there's good psychoeducation alongside that, to make sure that we don't have this sort of prevalence inflation hypothesis going on. You may have seen that kind of buzzing around.
But of course, we don't have a diagnostic scale, so we're not contributing to people labeling themselves as being sick or unwell, or walking around saying, oh, I have OCD. Or, not to minimize that those things exist, and people should seek treatment and do diagnostic scales if they are unwell. But yeah, we don't do that.
Well, I mean, it does seem to be kind of amongst some young people cool or trendy to have a mental health condition. I think an academic on Twitter shared that you can now buy on Etsy a t-shirt that says hot chicks have anxiety as an example. So it's an interesting space. But nonetheless, Daniel, good luck and thanks very much for your talk this afternoon. And I don't see any more questions online. Oh, there's two more. But wait.
But wait, there's more.
What's your biggest challenge?
Yes, it is social entrepreneurship. I don't self-label it as self-entrepreneur. I just try to get on with what I'm doing, and I avoid all these labels and stuff. What is our biggest challenge? It's a very competitive space, and when you're competing against the American markets and the Asia Pacific market and the global North, more Europe more specifically, it's tough. You have companies that have billions of dollars behind them doing things. So trying to sell a product in Africa is not a good business decision. If I wanted to make money, I should be focusing on the USA and Europe. End of discussion. I can make more money in the USA than if I sold my app in every single African country. But that's not my imperative. My imperative is to make money and to make a sustainable business and to ethically employ people and to create a tool that helps improve mental health and well-being. So that is important, and we will be selling overseas because of that. Not that they don't deserve a good tool anyway. But yeah, there's a lot of problems and challenges with selling in a smaller market that's less lucrative. And the simplest way to explain it is if you earn $1,000 a week, or you earn $10 a week, spending $1 when you earn very little, like that $1 is worth a hell of a lot more to you, and you're very picky with where you spend it than if you earn a lot. You're like, oh, I'll just take a chance on a mental health app. If it doesn't work out, then it's fine. And that is a lot of the issue. Is not that people don't want it or don't feel they need it. It's can they actually afford to pay for it and use it.
Does that help? So you're currently using NGOs to certainly that.
We're using NGOs to try reach markets and users who otherwise wouldn't be able to pay for the product. But we are still going to sell to businesses and large organizations and hopefully universities and whatever to reach people who can pay for the product.
Yeah, so I'm just thinking about, I think you said you don't collect too much personal data on that platform. I think we get around collecting some data. I'm sure people have to sign up using like an email, right? I mean, we just had this massive cybersecurity that days ago passed, right? Is how do you go about safeguarding privacy?
So there's certain laws and best practices that you have to follow. How do I answer this question? So the cloud servers in Europe have a lot of security in them. We also, because we collect very little information, it's also very easy for us to protect that information. We anonymize all of it on the back end. The only time that we can identify an individual is if somebody asks for their data to be deleted, which is a legal requirement. So somebody can mail us and say, I used your app, get rid of my data. So then we go look for their email address. So the short answer is like there's GDPR law in America, there's the European version of it, we have POPIA, which is extremely protectionist. If you follow all of those things, your chances of having a data breach is quite low. And we also use a lot of Google services and cloud services that protect a lot of the data, if that makes sense. If you want a more technical answer, I'll put you in touch with my dev team. But there's also the information regulator of South Africa that you report things to if something goes wrong, and they have certain standards. Yeah, there's a few things. That was probably not the best answer. But.
All right. Well, thank you. I think that's all the comments and questions. So thank you very much, Daniel, for your time, and good luck to you and your team. And we look forward to seeing where all of this goes.
Thank you.
So,
Yeah, I look forward to potentially collaborating with, you know, students all the way up to the top dogs in the department. So if you're interested or you know somebody, get in touch. Let's make the world a better place.
great. Thanks, Daniel.
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everyone online. Thank you.